Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Corey Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. Thanks for joining us on this Veterans Day. You'll be listening to this after Veterans Day, but we do want to give a shout out to all of our veterans today who've served our country or are serving. We appreciate your service and we celebrate you today. Today we have James Stephenson on the podcast. He's better known as the stepdad. He is a YouTuber and he is going to tell us the backstory of why he is so interested and so involved in helping the development of young men who don't have a dad to grow up with. So we were introduced by a mutual friend and we thought we just got to have James on and talk to us about what he's doing, his background, and how we can help young men who are growing up without dads to feel their own individual worth and to feel the love that maybe they're missing in that part of their life. So welcome to the podcast, James.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
James, tell us a little bit about your background growing up. What was your upbringing like?
Well, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My parents actually separated before I was born. In fact, I was starting to look at the dates. Both my parents have passed away now, and when my mom passed away about 3 years ago, I started looking at it, and I'm not even sure she knew she was expecting me when Dad left. So I might have been a little bit of a holy cow, gets on top of it.
Really?
And you know, time-wise, it was the year after JFK was assassinated. So here's my mom, and back then divorce is not that common. It's not uncommon, or it's not that unique either, I guess, but it's not as common as it is today, or for us as now. And so she's now discovered she's pregnant. She's got 4 kids and me on the way, and she's got to raise us on her own. And my dad actually lived a couple states away. He lived out in California, so we'd see him once or twice a year, and for a week or two at a time. And so I just grew up without a dad. I've listened to some of your other guests on the podcast. I realized it could be a lot worse because I could have an abusive dad. And so there are worse situations, but there's a lot of challenges that come, particularly for boys, growing up without a dad. And I don't know that we appreciate that in our society today. I don't think there's enough support out there for boys that are growing up and don't have a good positive male role model.
So what are some of those problems that you see when there's no dad in the house?
Well, there's, you can look at a lot of statistics, and there's a lot of them out there. But from my own experience, which is really what's been my motivation to do this, is you question yourself a lot, and it's ironic. It's not logical. You can, in adulthood, you look at it and you address it with logic, and you say, okay, I understand. Dad didn't leave me. He left a bad situation, and it wasn't personal. It wasn't because something's wrong with me. But when you're a kid growing up, those are the questions that are rolling around in your mind. And frankly, they stay there in your subconscious. They affect you the rest of your life unless and until you can actually deal with them, address them, recognize them first of all. And then you can't logic your way through emotions. You have to emotion your way. You have to go through those emotions. I remember I was sitting at my dad's funeral. He passed away in 2005. And I did have positive relationships with my dad my whole time growing up. It was just a week at a time, and he wasn't there, for most of the time. So that's what made it difficult. But my sister-in-law was speaking, and she made the comment about my brother. She said that he's come to these points in his life, and he actually went and stayed in California, worked with my dad. And she made the comment, and eventually he forgave him, he forgave your dad. And that jumped out at me as I'm sitting there listening to my sister-in-law talk. And I went up to her after. I had to ask him, forgave him for what? Because I thought I was the only one that felt like Dad left me or something like that. And she said, for not being there. And that has an impact. It makes you worry about yourself. Is something wrong with me that my dad would leave me? At least these are my experiences. And then the other doubts that come up are, what kind of a dad am I going to be? Because I loved kids. I wanted to have kids, but I was worried that, am I going to suck at being a dad because I haven't had a good example? Mm-hmm. I did have a lot of friends, and you observe and you pay a lot of attention and get some variety. What kind of a dad, what kind of a husband am I going to be because I didn't have that example growing up?
tell us a little bit about the journey that you've taken now with what you do in a lot of your spare time, it looks like, in creating videos for these young men to watch. We all know our kids are, in their phones a lot and watching YouTube. And so I think that this is brilliant because it's going where the kids already are. And if you can introduce that, I watched your introduction video and you called everybody Johnny, and you say, when I say Johnny, I mean you. Insert your name because I'm talking to you. And I just thought it was so personal that you wanted to have like this individual relationship with each one of these boys that are watching the YouTube channel. Like if they had a question about something and their dad's not there to answer it, they could probably go and
make a comment
or something, and you would make a video for that young man.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't find people that take upon themselves projects like this unless they have some type of very, very personal story about, in their background about where this came from and the desire to help these young men. So did you grow up and have a family?
Yeah. My wife and I have 5 kids. Our youngest, I've got a teenager for another 2.5, 3 months, and then he turns 20, and then they're all between 20 and 30 at that point. But yeah, we did have 5 kids together, and still do. I guess we see most of them most of the time. But to answer your question, Kirk, it really comes down to an experience I had when I turned 12 or about that age, early teenage years. I was involved in scouting, and one of the leaders in the group just became a really good friend and mentor, at all levels. He was really a surrogate dad, and there was more than just one, but there was one in particular. His name was Mark Gould. I tell a lot of stories about him. In the scout group, we would do things to earn money, for the troop. So one of them was every first Saturday every month we'd go around and gather newspapers, because they used to pay you for newspaper, scrap paper, bring it in, turn it in. They'd pay you by the ton, and we'd use that money towards the troop expenses. And I remember, we'd go do that, and back then you can ride around the back of a pickup truck on the street and it's not a big deal. And of course, just in the neighborhood. But one Saturday, most of us didn't show up. and the next day he's chewing us out, and and he could do that because we knew he really cared about us. And that's why it actually hurt a lot more. If a guy doesn't care about you and he's chewing you out, then, he's just a jerk, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, in fact, I remember another story like this. One of my friends was a big Kiss fan. Kiss was big back then. I guess they're still around somewhat. Geriatric Kiss, maybe now, but they were coming to town, and I kind of just followed my friend's lead as far as that stuff goes. And he had all the Kiss albums, and I made some big Gene Simmons platform shoes, and just nailing 2x4s on the bottoms of some old Sunday shoes. And in any event, I mentioned to Mark that I kind of wanted to go to this concert too. And he looked at me and he said, Jimmy, if you go to that concert, I'm going to come down there. I'm going to find you. I'm going to drag you out of there. I'm going to kick your butt all the way home. And I told that story to my friend, and he said, man, I would be so pissed. If he said that to me, I'd be so pissed, because he was a big Kiss fan. I wasn't that big of a Kiss fan. I was just because my friends were. But to me, that told me more love. He couldn't have told me he loved me more than what he did with that. Not because, if you like Kiss, that's great. If you don't, that's good. Obviously, he didn't.
For a young impressionable boy, it's probably teenager, not a great place to be.
He didn't think it was a good spot for me to be, right. But I still remember that because to me, my reaction was the exact opposite of my friends when I told him, because I knew he cared about me. And if he cared about me, he could tell me that. He could chew me out, and it would mean a lot more than someone that doesn't care about you.
So you've done, how many videos were you saying now?
Well, there's kind of 2 classes. There's edited videos that take a lot of time, and there's about 65 or so of those. And then there's some short ones. I don't know, Kirk, if you stumbled across some of the shave video ones.
Yeah.
I'm a little hesitant with those because it's like, that's a little weird, just a guy shaving every morning. Corey doesn't know about that.
No, I try to forget about how to shave.
Well, let me read through a couple of these on your YouTube channel right now. So there is the morning shave thoughts, the blinker bulb challenge, how to change a blinker bulb, the secret about your parents, Is it bad to get chewed out? How to make a Halloween dummy, bathroom fan motor replacement, stuff to do with cars, how to shave, fishing, camping, model rockets, and then a bunch of shorts, even one that all of the women in the audience will probably enjoy is how to use the bathroom, which includes putting the toilet seats up and putting the toilet seats down.
And wiping off any spillage.
So those are some of the topics, and I like this. What is a French cuff on a shirt?
You'd like that one.
Yeah. Anyway, I kind of I went down the rabbit hole last night with my wife in preparation for the podcast because I really wanted to have watched some of these. And I just think it's great what you're doing, coming from a personal story. So tell us a little bit about some of the people that you've maybe impacted that have reached out to you through the channel, and while maintaining confidentiality, tell us about some of these boys and the things that you've learned that maybe in your perspective we could do better as a population of gentlemen who interact with kids, of how we can see kids that might need something and how we can help provide that to them.
For starters, let me make that invitation if I can. I was in a speaker competition a couple of years ago, and I was talking about this, the topic, and the channel's only a couple of years old. I actually reserved the domain name back in 2015 because it's been, working on me for a long time, and it is, and it continues to be a little bit of a spare time thing or an in addition to project. I figured the target audience that I've got, boys growing up without a dad, younger teenage boys, are primarily already on YouTube, possibly TikTok. The one forum that I've had the most interaction is on Reddit. There's a teenage subreddit, and by the rules they allow adults to be in there. So I've posted some stuff in there. It's gotten really quiet in there lately, but when I first started this, I made a post in there. Hey, I've got this channel for boys. I got a whole string of comments that came out of that, and some of them they're both heartwarming and heartbreaking, and not everyone's fatherlessness comes the same way as mine did, through divorce. I mean, one boy said, "Thank you for doing this. My dad died when he was young, and this helps." And there's others where my dad's going to leave, and I don't know how I'm going to deal with it. So they're in the heat of that. Others are, my dad's abusive. They don't use that word, a jerk. He's toxic. Thank you for doing this. And that's most of the feedback I've gotten at this point. And I wish there was a way, and I look forward to when there is more two-way dialogue with this, but right now it's largely unilateral. I do get some comments on the videos in the YouTube channel, and that's encouraging. I had one, it was actually an aunt of someone said, "Hey, can you make a video on how to water the lawn?" Sure, what, I've got a sprinkler system. Is that what we're talking about here or not? No, with hose. Okay, I can do that. So made a quick one and put that out there. So, my hope is that it will reach more over time. Obviously, that's one of the nice things, just like podcasts, that they're out there. So as you get more traction, you'll get more response and more impact. Really, that's the goal with this, is just to help, like you said in the introduction, Kirk, it's just to help boys growing up without a dad to really feel they've got value, they've got worth, and frankly, we need them as a society. We need them now more than ever. We need more gentlemen now than ever.
So you've had all these videos, and some of them obviously are deep, talking about some pretty heavy stuff, and others are shaving and watering the lawn and some of those kind of things, which are valuable lessons, but not necessarily a deep lesson, right? What are some that you feel like have been most impactful? Or maybe another way to ask that question is, what are some where you would say, I would want my kids, or I would want you to watch these videos are most important if you had your kids watch them, kind of a thing?
How to shave a cat. I'm kidding. That one has the most views on the channel right now.
I'm sure it does.
How to shave a cat. A lot of the times, Corey, is what I was doing is if I'm doing something around the house and I can, it takes twice as long or more if you're going to film it too. But if I'm doing something that they might not see then let me film it, because it's kind of like them having a dad. They can watch that. It's
Right.
like, well, if my dad was here shaving in the morning, or whatever, well, we needed to shave our cat because they shed in the spring. So we did that one. My daughter helped me with that one, Hannah, and she made the comment. She said, I don't know how many teenage boys are going to want to watch learn how to shave a cat. And I don't think most of the viewers on that one are, but that one's...
You say shave a cat, and I think no hair on the cat. You're like talking
it's
about
just
trimming the
It's
cat.
just trimmers.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just
so
trimmers. No,
anybody that loves cats, we want hate now.
And that's, yeah, no. And that's funny, because those are the comments I get from the animal activists. Most of them are very grateful for that video, because most people want to know, that are looking for it, want to know how to do that. But to answer your question, Corey, I mean, some of those videos are deep. Like, why did my dad leave me? Or how could my dad leave me? Answers to those questions. The real answer to your question is, I haven't made all the videos that are going to be most important. I've got a list, the birds and the bees talk.
Yeah.
I was said, I had that on my whiteboard, and my son comes down, and it's kind of funny and embarrassing at the same time. He says, well, Dad, you never had that with me. Well, okay, let me make a video, and you can watch the video, and then you'll know, But,
Well, that's a good example, actually. I mean, that's one that we all have to have at some point with our kids, and is uncomfortable always on both sides of that table, right? I mean, I had that with my little boy. My wife did the girls. I did the boy, and I want to say I did pretty good with that, But man, if you didn't have a dad in the house that you knew, that loved you, that video could be really, really important. Yeah. No doubt.
And it'll be fun. The good news is you can edit it, so you get as many takes as you need to make sure you can get it right.
I have 3 teenagers in the house right now, and we had a late night talk this last week, and we went into it, man. Mm. Like, I was like, I'm taking the filter off. Like, these kids already know a lot of this stuff, so I just took the filter off, and I just told them, like, this is why, this is how, and Mom and Dad love you, and this is why there are certain rules and standards in our house, so that you don't have to learn things the hard way. And I walked back into my room with my wife, and she was like, well, it's out there now,
wow, huh?
And like, because we had not done that before, and we had 3 teenagers, 2 boys, 1 girl, same room, talking about everything, and I realized of my own fathering that I kicked that off. I had the birds and the bees talk when they were coming into 10, 11, 12. But then you kind of go, well, they probably know what they need to know right now, right? And I come to realize this last week that you probably are way behind. I was way behind in talking about that stuff, because it's not one conversation. I think just the vernacular that we use when we say the talk, it's not just one talk. It's a lot of talks. Mm-hmm. And what I hope is that the dialogue is there, and that the communication channels are open, because you're going to have questions as a young kid, and you're growing up in a world I didn't grow up in, and it's out there, and it's earlier, and it's more prevalent. It's more accessible. It's talked about more. So, it's the talks. It's not the talk anymore. The birds and the bee talks. So, I had kind of an eye-opening experience this week with that. And I can see how if you didn't have anybody that loved you or talked to you about those types of things, that you'd think, well, am I not important? Is this not an important topic enough for somebody to talk to me about? So I have seen many men develop bonds with youth that, even though they have fathers in the home, those bonds outside of their family are very strong and valuable. Tell us how to build those bonds with fatherless kids, and maybe just kids that gravitate towards us. How do we develop appropriate relationships with those youth so that we can be good resources to them?
Mm-hmm. Well, it all starts with a foundation of trust and love. It's just like, and don't try to be something you're not. People see right through that. As adults too, we just kind of pretend together that we don't see through that. But as kids, it's transparent. You've got to be genuinely interested in them, and you really have to care about them. And it's just the formula that Mark Gould used for me. You know, he wasn't somebody else. I'd go to his house on Sunday and watch football and eat crackers with him and his family. And I was on a radio program a month or so ago, and I mentioned this to a guy. You know, he'd take me camping with him. Now, as soon as I say that, what do you think? And he said, "Oh, you kind of got me."
You think, can you do that anymore?
Exactly. You know, oh, he's a pedophile and he's grooming him. And that's had a horrible impact, because the most important resource for a child growing up without a dad is a positive male role model. And we've made it not safe as adult men to be a positive male role model. It's all, you know, you got to have two. Well, I would have never, well, you know, his wife was there. I mean, and we knew him. It's not like he was a stranger. But, you know, as soon as you say that, oh, you want to go camping with me? You know, unfortunately, the lights go off. Oh, we got to watch out. You got to watch out. So to answer your question, Kirk, you know, be confident in your own goodness as a gentleman, as an adult man. When you're aware of someone in your neighborhood, in your circle of influence that is a child growing up without a dad. And I talk a lot about boys, largely because there's a lot of things out there for support for girls already. And the unspoken, unintended message is that boys don't matter as much. Frankly, the best thing I can do to help girls that are growing up without a dad is to help them have more boys grow up to be responsible adult men. So if you are a responsible adult man, a gentleman, and you're aware of someone, don't be afraid to take them under your wing. I mean, do it. Invite them over. When you're doing something, you can do it with them. Invite them to be part of it. And frankly, it'll probably be annoying. I'm sure I annoyed Mark numerous times. And it's really over. You know, for me, it was probably a 6-year period. 4 to 6 year period that he lived down half block down the street. In fact, right before I came here, I drove through the old neighborhood and just remember, going to his house and he'd come over. Mom's car the family car needed brakes changed. He'd come over and help me how to do that. And I remember I cut my thumb pretty bad in the process. But, I had someone there that could show me that. I wouldn't know how to do it otherwise. And we have a lot of people today that don't know how to do some of these things. One of the videos is how to change a fluorescent light bulb. Because they're a little different, but, whatever you're doing around the house, if you can help someone learn those lessons, then take that opportunity. Just don't be afraid to do it.
So you mentioned earlier that you were kind of nervous about being a dad because you didn't have one there when you were around, and we're all nervous about being a dad is the reality, right?
Yeah.
And the reason the podcast exists is we're still trying to figure it out. So my question to you is, okay, now you have these kids that are 20 to 30 or almost 20 to 30.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that worked? Some of the things that didn't work so hot? Like, what would you tell the dads out there of things that, tools in your tool chest of things that worked and even things that you wish you would have done different?
Yeah, no, and I got some of both actually, but one year for Christmas, my wife, honey, what do you want for Christmas? And this is when our kids are small. I mean, that's a ton of work. Yeah. She said, I just want some time at home alone, 3 hours a week. All right, well, that's how our Saturday outings got born. I said, okay, every Saturday I'll take the kids and go somewhere. And, we lived in Michigan at the time in the Detroit area. And the good news is they have science museums and other venues, places that you can go to take kids. So I would load the kids up and I'd take them somewhere and I'm early in my corporate life too. So sometimes it would end at McDonald's and they're in the playland and I'm on my laptop trying to get something done in that time as well. But that time with the kids in those types of environments, those types of activities were just priceless and continue to be fond memories now. Carve out the time. It's funny because my wife, after a little while, she got to where it's like, I'm missing out on this.
I want to come.
So they became family Saturday outings, and I don't know if she got her 3 hours of alone time at home after that, but that was a good thing. I'm always glad that we did that. They're not young forever, and it seems like they will be when you're growing up and you got a house full of little ones, or even one or two, but they do grow up, and the thing that I probably wouldn't do, or I would advise against, is I found myself, my concern is that I've communicated conditional love at times through criticism. And I never thought of it as it's correction, right? I'm just helping them be better. Well, most of the time, my motivation in that is, if my kids don't look good, then I'm not going to look good, Well, that's not good motivation. And they're helping me understand that now in their adulthood, that I've been much too critical. So don't be so critical. Quick to praise, slow to criticize.
I think most dads have that problem, is the reality, because that is definitely something that we've heard before, and every time we hear it, I go, yeah, Corey.
Great reminder.
You need to work on that, buddy.
Well, and that is it. Like, I think every dad has to learn that lesson, and probably moms as well.
Yeah.
They probably don't have to learn it as often as we do, but at some point in every dad's life, they have to realize that the kid needs to feel that you love them regardless of their actions, regardless of their performance in school. Like, nothing in the world could keep you from loving that kid, and that. Mm-hmm. But do they? Mm-hmm. Right? And it's hard sometimes. I know that I've had friends that have say, you know what? I love my kid at 15, but I do not like them.
Yeah.
There are certain times when they are just really tough to deal with. But the love never stops for them. And just that they know that, and kind of going back to that conversation that I had this week with my teens, is I reiterated that like probably 6 times. They were like, yeah, Dad, you already told us that. I'm like, we're doing this because we love you. You need to understand that we love you. Right. And that's the only reason that we're still up at midnight talking about this, is that it's important and we love you. So that's been a good lesson that I've been able to integrate into my fathering skills. Tell us about something that you do that's a fun family tradition.
This one probably isn't a tradition anymore, but when we were growing up, it was coming home for vacation, every 2 years or 2 weeks every year, driving across from Michigan to Utah to, I learned there's a lot of lessons you learn that way as a dad too, but that was a tradition that was just fun. Our 2-week vacation, when we'd come home and see both grandparents and both sets of grandparents and hang out and do things and see other family members. We still get together, but kids get their own lives and they go to St. Louis or Germany or wherever they're going to live, and so you can't always get together for that stuff. But the family reunions or the family vacations every year, that was key as well.
As your kids have grown older and they've got their own stuff going on, mm-hmm. their own families, as you get older, you realize you got to let some things go and accept some things where they're available, and you kind of create your own life. And I've seen this happen, in my family. I still have grandparents alive, but they have great grandkids and sometimes great great grandkids, mm-hmm. and there are so many things going on. For you, it sounds like there's also space that separates the family. So as you've gotten to come in, you're kind of coming into this stage right now of life where your kids are creating their own lives. Mm-hmm. Have you learned anything through that process? Are you currently learning anything right now that you would like to share with the rest of us?
Was that an inspired thought you had? Yes. I think some of my most challenging or even difficult lessons as a dad is as my kids get into adulthood. Hopefully that foundation is always there, that they know how much you love them. But they're going to make their own choices, and sometimes they're not the choices you wish they would make. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's really hard. And yet you still love them. I guess that's maybe the answer to the question, Kirk, is that what I'm learning right now is that, they're going to make their own, they set sail, they're their own ship at that point. and hopefully they'll come home to the harbor once in a while, and you can spend time with them, love them, and we do. And gratefully, most of our kids are closer, so we do on a regular basis. But they do make their own choices. They have their own lives, and we get to love them no matter what that is.
Yeah, I often think about what you're just talking about. My kids are still at home, and I still have a few more years with them, from 15 to 8. So I have a few more years to kind of impart to them my thoughts, right? And this idea of principle-centered life, and that's how I think of it, is how can I give them the principles they need so that when they're governing themselves, they make some right choices, realizing that they're going to make some wrong ones too, or at least ones I don't agree with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly, that's the whole reason that I was so interested in what Kirk was doing with his kids when he started the Gentleman Project, because I loved the idea of saying, oh man, how am I going to impart these ideas and principles to my kids? And I still worry to this day, am I doing that? Am I doing it enough? Am I doing it in the right way? All that kind of stuff. So, cause you can't control it after they're at some point, sometimes even in the home, I would imagine that at some point you're not in control anymore. They're in control. I can't take the cell phone away anymore or whatever the way to,
is,
whatever the punishment is. So that's I think an aha moment for a lot of dads and moms when they get to that age.
Yeah. Well, and maybe part of that lesson is that maybe a way other than your own is still a good way.
Yeah.
So,
sometimes we have to realize that, right?
Yeah.
And some of the lessons that you learn when you're out on your own are the best lessons. We've all been there. It's not like we weren't in that moment in time where we went a different direction than our parents thought we ought to go once in a while. And sometimes it's the only way to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm doing right now with my 15-year-old, she wants to buy a car. In about a year from now. And I said, well, yeah, you're going to have to buy a car. And I told her, well, I'll pay for half. But you have to raise the other half first. And she's been doing her best to work at the golf course and babysit, and it's going slow. And so I told her, well, I'll tell you what, if you read a book that I prescribe and you write a 1-page report on it, I'll pay you to do every book. I'll pay you X amount to read it. And she's halfway through the first book in about a month, which is great. And I thought, oh, good. See, I can teach her through these books. It's not even me teaching her, but I know what's in there. So I'm hoping for those listening, that might be a trick. She's reading How to Win Friends and Influence People right now. And I thought, oh yeah, that's a really good basics of communication and interpersonal skills. And hopefully it helps.
So, James, tell us what you think it means to be a gentleman.
The best definition, I don't know if it's original with me, but to be courageous and kind simultaneously. And that's easier said than done. Having the courage to stand up against popular opinion, for example, but to do it graciously, if that's what's called for. I think that's probably the best definition I would give of being a gentleman, courageous and kind at the same time.
I really like that.
That's a good one.
We haven't had anything close to that definition yet. So succinctly put, I like it because, I think back to some of the lessons that I tried to teach my kids, and they were separate lessons, but a gentleman is kind is one of them. And then a gentleman is courageous or, stands up for what he believes in was one of the lessons that we did. And I think those two are kind of the paramount cornerstones of being a gentleman.
Yeah.
As we wrap up the podcast, tell people how they can get to the YouTube channel and how they can become involved if they know somebody who is growing up without a dad and they want to find this YouTube channel. Tell them how they find you.
Well, the fastest, the easiest way is to go to mystepdad.org. Eventually I'll have a website up with that one. Right now, that just points to the YouTube channel. So if you go to mystepdad.org right now, then it will take you to the YouTube channel. If you want to subscribe there, that'd be fantastic. And share it. If you know boys that are growing up without a dad, and I know a lot of the people watching it are not boys, and that's fantastic too. There's a lot of people that care about boys that are watching it, and some that just want to know how to shave a cat, right? So, or change the oil or the brakes or whatever. But that would be great. Go to mystepdad.org, and they can email me at dad@mystepdad.org.
That's awesome. Thank you, James, for coming in to the studio and being on the podcast. We appreciate the work that you're doing. What I find heartening and uplifting is that there's people like you that take it upon themselves to get outside themselves and fill a need in society that they see needs filling. And they do it for really no reason other than to help people. And it doesn't take you watching even 2 of your videos to see that you've got a heart of gold.
Thank you.
Then you're just trying to help these young men that are growing up without a dad. So thank you for being on the podcast and adding your touch to the world.
Well, thank you very much. An honor to be here.
Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. James Stephenson, mystepdad.org. If you liked today's episode, please like and subscribe to the podcast channels on the platforms that you listen to your podcasts and consume your media. We appreciate you listening and taking the time out of your day. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Corey Moore. Be a gentleman, everyone.